Aloha. Aloha. My name's Serge Kahili King. Welcome to the Hawaiian Art Museum and our Wednesday night talk story.
Aloha.
Answer questions before anybody has asked them. A little bit about Hawaiian culture that I'll start in. A couple different things tonight. One, because we had a presentation of something very unusual as far as Hawaiian culture goes. Now, sorry that you cannot see it very well. It looks like an earthworm in the jar. Throughout Polynesia, one of the things that's very curious and not known by everyone except Polynesians is that there are no snakes. You don't find snakes anywhere in Polynesia. And a lot of people realize that and say, all right, that's curious. Personally, I think they ate them all when they during a famine one time, but that's my personal opinion. We have no proof of why there aren't. There are next door in Melanesia, Micronesia, but none in Polynesia. Except, folks, there is a very, very tiny, itsy-bitsy, teeny-weeny, real-life snake in Hawaii, native to the islands. It isn't very big. It's about maybe 5 inches long, very thin, thinner than a usual earthworm, and of course not segmented. And it has eyes, but it's very, very small. It doesn't grow any larger than that. There's also a legless lizard. And without a magnifying glass, I can't guarantee which one this is, but it looks to me like the other snakes that I've seen, so that's what we're going to call it, okay? The Hawaiian language, as we know it today, was put into written form for the first time by Christian missionaries who came from Boston. Hawaiian was an oral language with a great many differences in it, but one of the first things the missionaries did when they came here in 1820 was to start learning the language and put it together in a way that they could teach people to read and write, primarily so they could read and so they could write, but mainly so they could read the Bible. But they did teach everyone how to read and write, and they developed primers. But what I want to talk about first are the earliest dictionaries, and some of the later ones too. This is the first real dictionary that was ever published, and this is by a missionary named Loren Andrews, Reverend Loren Andrews. And this was published in 1865. This is not an original copy. This is a reprint, but it's a reprint of that original dictionary, complete. If anybody is familiar with Max Freedom Long, who wrote some things and taught about his version of Huna, one of the philosophies, the esoteric philosophy of Hawaii, why this is the dictionary that he used. And this is the one that he copied parts of for some of his books. It, as far as a dictionary goes, it was a good first attempt, but it isn't terribly large, and it's been determined that there were a lot of errors, and there were no pronunciation marks, but it was the best thing available for quite a while. What I'd like to do is just take one word to show how the language has developed over the years. The word I'm going to look at here, I figured, what the heck, let's look at the word huna. One of the interesting things about this dictionary, by the way, is a very detailed chronology of Hawaiian events that it has in the back. Some of the dates are even before the arrival of Captain Cook, and although he puts down very specific dates, I got to tell you, those dates are guesswork, because none of the Hawaiians had any dates for anything before Captain Cook arrived, and the Westerners started using dates. At any rate, it has that in it, which is very interesting. And Let's look at this one word, what he has to say about huna. The first thing he says is huna, to hide, to conceal, and to keep from sight or knowledge of another, to keep back truth in speaking, to hide as a trap or a snare, to hide, to conceal, to disguise oneself, to protect, to defend, to conceal as knowledge or wisdom. What we know now is that he's not talking about the word huna. He's talking about the verb huna, and it's different. It very definitely means to conceal. Okay? He goes on then, for a basic meaning of huna, just huna, which is to be small, to be little, to be reduced fine as powder. Something very hard, fine and hard to see. That's one of the basic meanings. And that which is concealed, whether it's the private parts of the body or esoteric knowledge. Okay? So anyway, that's what he has to say about huna. The next dictionary to become available was first published in 1954. And it had some later incarnations into the 70s, maybe the early 80s. See what it says about that? Nope. The last one of this would have been, the third edition of this one was 1965. And this is the Hawaiian English Dictionary, and this is the only one that was available after Lauren Andrews' dictionary and before the next really updated edition of this. This is an interesting dictionary because it has some things we don't find in the dictionary anymore. One is a glossary of Hawaiian gods and goddesses, which is very interesting. And the other one is there's some curiosity in Hawaiian. They have, when they talk about the gods and goddesses, different forms that the gods and goddesses can take. And it has a list of those forms for a number of the gods and goddesses. Some can turn into fish, and others into trees, and others into different animals or clouds. And it has a whole list of that in the dictionary. But the word huna in this one is just a little different. It starts off with the first meaning is minute, particle, grain, crumb, gram, small, little, powdery. Okay, so you get all of that meaning in there. And something which is hidden or secret. And it does give huna as meaning to hide something. And that's basically all it has. It has some other meanings about to hide in secret, like to hide the body of a loved one in a secret cave. That's hunakele, and a few other compound words that have to do with it. Okay? Interestingly, the most of the time when huna is used in front of a word, it has the meaning of small. Not always. And when it's used after, it has the meaning of hidden, but not always. That's one of the wonders of learning Hawaiian. Okay? And so that's the one in here. Then we come to the newest edition of the Hawaiian Dictionary. By the way, this is mainly by Mary Kawena Pukui, an extremely wise and knowledgeable Hawaiian woman. And another Hawaiian, although his name isn't Hawaiian, Samuel H. Elbert, who was her partner in gathering information about Hawaiian culture and putting the dictionary together. This doesn't have any lists of god and goddesses, doesn't have any of their bodies. It's just a straight-out dictionary with more words than any other dictionary has ever had. Okay? The only thing different about the word huna in this one is, let's see where we get the word here. Here we go. Almost the same, except it adds a few things. Speck, tiny bit, scrap, to the other words that were mentioned. And said it usually follows, when it means hidden or secret, usually follows nouns. You know, it says that. So just has a few little things in there. Let's see. Common fine red seaweeds. And in the original it said something about the seaweeds made a good gelatin. This version says it makes a good colloid. Because this is modern, we use fancy words now. You know, gelatin is not fancy enough. Okay? That's this dictionary. Just showing you some of the differences. In 1986 and 7, however, around in the 70s especially, Hawaiian was almost dead as a language. There were very, very few native speakers left. Then there started to be a Hawaiian Renaissance. And so in the mid-80s, little over the mid-80s, they got together a lexicon group, it was called, of Hawaiian elders who were fluent in their language as their native language. And this council, this group got together and began forming words to create a new dictionary to keep Hawaiian up with the modern world. And this, published in 1998, Mamaka which has the meaning of carrying something forward into the dawn of a new era. That's basically the meaning of that. And they have done a number of ways. Wherever possible, they've used extended meanings of existing Hawaiian words. And then once in a while, using roots, why they have created new words that are somehow related to the concept that they're bringing into the language. And then on occasion, when necessary, they use what's called a transliteration, which is an Hawaiianized version of an English word. For instance, they do that a lot. You hear some of what people think are Hawaiian names, like Kimo, which is actually Jim, because there's no J in Hawaiian. And they always have to end in a vowel. So the name Kimo is really Jim. Keoki is George. Okay? And, you know, there's Keoni is John. So, you know, there's a lot of transliteration done when necessary. There's a lot of great stuff in here, and I think you'll find it interesting what we find is a meaning of the word huna. In modern Hawaiian, or at least an extended meaning, it means a particle, as in an atom. It means huna is the word for a bit, as in a computer bit. Okay? It's a biological cell. It's actually huna ola, which means life secret or hidden life, or small life. It'd be better. Tissue as a structural material of a plant or an animal. The word huna is used for that. And my favorite is coming up here. Oh, come on. Somewhere in here is a meaning. I know it's here because I read it. Anyway, it means an alien. For some reason I cannot fathom. But that's one of the meanings of it. Okay? So we've really gone a long way from some of the original concepts, except for the idea of something very tiny, small, and hard to see. And that's the esoteric knowledge, too. It's not kept hidden. It's just hard to see. Okay? So a little bit about the evolution of the language. Now we can open it up to questions that'll take us elsewhere. So who would like to begin?
As power. Mana was more of an influence rather than power.
Well, that's what power is. Power is the ability to influence or the ability to do work or cause an effect. That's what power is.
So mana can be created as power.
Mana is power. But it's the power to do or to act. Okay? It's not, doesn't mean control. The power to influence. That's why one of the meanings is authority. But only where authority means the ability to influence. Yes.
I always and the mana and
Yes.
the memory of l'uomo. The Aka Corp keep the memory, or
All right.
there is the memory.
Let's talk about we have a concept here. You don't hear me talking about it a lot because it confuses people. But it is one of the concepts that's important in this knowledge. We talk about mana, which is power. Power to do, to act, to get an effect. Then we also talk about aka. Now, aka is a Hawaiian word that refers to something like the ether, the what you might call pre-matter that fills the universe. And one of the concepts is that the aka holds memory and potential, and in an infinite universe. Okay? And we use this sometimes as a concept and we talk about aka threads that connect us to people and places and things. And we work with those. You can think of aka also as something like an electromagnetic field that you can influence and that you can get knowledge from. So it can be thought of in the old ancient traditional shamanic style of a spider web. It can also be thought of in the modern concept of a field of possibilities and probabilities. Okay?
So there are memories are important because are
Sure.
string of
The universe has memory. Everything is alive, aware, and responsive, and that means the memory too. So you can think of the aka as the memory of the universe. But it's more than memory, because all time exists at once in this infinite universe. So that's why it's also possibilities and probabilities and potentials, not just memories.
So mana depends from aka and aka
No,
depends
no,
from,
no, it's not the same.
No, not the same, but
Mana is, how can we put this? Mana is this influence that works through the aka.
so,
Mana is not energy. It's any kind of influence that works through the connections that we have in the world.
mana is not energy. What is it?
It's not energy, no.
What is it?
Mana is power. It's not the same thing at all. You can have energy, but not necessarily power.
So what is
Energy is just sitting there. Mana is always active. Mana is the capacity for influencing something, doing work, having an effect. That's mana. If you use energy to have an effect, you are using mana. But the energy is not the mana.
the aka?
Your skill, your authority, your confidence, your position, your sometimes simply your name, what people think of you as your name, all of these have influence. That's mana in action. So energy can have mana, but not necessarily. It's not the only form.
Okay. There is also a theory that the universe is filled with a black this energy or invisible stuff.
Yeah, there's lots of theories.
And you mentioned once that the universe is filled with love, which is the most powerful.
Sure, we can say the universe is filled with anything we want because it's an infinite universe.
Oh, right.
That's right. So it's filled with everything.
How does aka relate to this infinite sort of love energy that's created everything?
How can I put this? It depends on how you want to define love, as a feeling, as an act, as a state.
It's
But
energy-
aka is
energy of
simply
creation.
aka is simply the that's why I don't talk about it so much. Potential for manifestation in the universe.
You
Okay.
said pre-matter.
I said pre-matter, right.
That made sense.
Okay, good. For some people that'll work.
Coming out of Poe.
But it's the potential for manifesting. Right.
Does that come out of Poe?
What's that?
Does that come out of Poe?
Well, yeah, because you can't see it. Po is anything you can't see. Yes. The question is money a form of mana? No, not if it's stuck under your mattress or buried in the ground.
But it's usable to create.
Ah, the mana only is there when it's being used. On the other hand, if you have a big stack of money and somebody else knows about it, that might give you mana because they'll be influenced by the fact that you have a big stack of money, even if you don't use it. See? There are a number of stories that used to be popular in Europe. One of them was of a man who found a 1,000-pound note. And he could never spend it because, nobody could cash in a 1,000-pound note. But everybody gave him credit because he had a 1,000-pound note. And so the mana did not, in a way, came from his possession of something other people considered valuable. See? So it wasn't the money itself, it was other people's reaction to it that gave him the mana.
In the 70s, there were a bunch of religious cults and sects that kind of urged people to give away their money and their possessions. Do you
Sure.
have an interpretation?
To give away their money? Yeah, well, that's one of the oldest con jobs in the world. Okay.
It was not always to give it to the cult, it was often to give
No, that's true. You see, among many people, there has been this separation between the spiritual world and the material world. This is a very Western type of concept, okay? And the material world has been considered as lesser. In fact, in some of the early Christianity and some of the current Christianity, the material world was created by Satan. Therefore, it's bad and evil by its very nature. Money, being a tool of that material world, must be corrupt by association. So what you want to do is get rid of all of this stuff. Now, this was particularly among people who had the belief that a time was coming when they were going to be lifted up into heaven, and if they had anything material with them, that was going to get in the way. So get rid of everything material. Now, there are vaguely similar ideas in Hinduism and Buddhism, but it isn't that the material world is bad, it's basically that it's meaningless. And what they're trying to do is not to get rid of all of that, but to get rid of being attached to it. For some people, they find the only way they can do that is not have anything to do with it. But other people can be very wealthy and use that wealth and not be attached to the wealth. So being unattached to it is more of an Asian concept. Hawaiian concept is very different because there's no distinction between spiritual and material. It's your behavior that makes the difference. It's what you do. They are both so intertwined, you can't really separate them. And so there's nothing intrinsically evil about anything. There's no such concept in Hawaiian. There's evil behavior, and that has to do with harming people. But evil doesn't exist as an abstract, an entity, or a force at all. So the material world was very much appreciated. Okay? And one of the best words, the word for harmony and goodness, it essentially means goodness, includes the idea of wealth. That's pono. Okay? That's good stuff. You got to learn how to use it, right, to get good effects, but it's good, okay, to have money. Okay? What Mae West said something along those lines. The Polynesians would have understood perfectly. I've been rich and I've been poor. Rich is better. Okay? Okay? So when we look at all these things and reasons why, we have to understand the social, cultural context in which these ideas grow up. Okay. Yes?
And if there's something that we don't want, is it better to try to get rid of it or to ignore it?
Okay, energy flows where attention goes. We were talking about this a little bit before. If there's something you don't want, it's better to work on not caring. Ignoring is too much like suppression. It's still there, and the not wanting it is still there. You just refuse to feel that. And you'll know because it'll pop up in your life. Life gives you the feedback of who and what you really are. Okay? But remember to look at the good parts too, folks. Okay? If you can get yourself into a state of truly not caring one way or the other, then if that thing has no use in your life, it'll fade out of your life. Okay? Or you can get, it's kind of like being unattached. So now you're free to do something with it, to use it, to let it go. Doesn't make any difference. It's no longer an influence. It has no more mana where you are concerned. But the more you dislike it, the more mana you give it. Okay? Okay. All right, and I think what I'll do tonight is do this Hawaiian culture in relationship to the proverbs that these islands have. There's a wonderful book about proverbs that was written by one of the great Hawaiians who helped to preserve the culture, Mary Kawena Pukui. And she wrote a book that is full of Hawaiian, thousands, literally, of Hawaiian proverbs that she gathered together. Since, in a lot of the reading that I've done, I know that there's more from other Hawaiian sources that didn't get into that book, but she did the biggest collection of it. Hawaiians used a lot of proverbs for many different purposes. And what I decided to do tonight is tell you some of the proverbs that describe the 7 principles that I talk about. Because these 7 principles, I always mention them in English, and yet they come out of Hawaiian culture. And even though not every family will use the wording or the names or those certain special names that we give them in my family's tradition, the concepts are out there in the culture and in the society. So there are 7 of these. We have one of them, which is the first, related to the first principle. And so I'll show you this and hold it up. This is the one that we have, which is big enough to see. This is Aole Pau, Aohe Pau. Okay, Aohe Pau Ka'ike, Ikahalau Ho'okahi. And I want you to think about that for a few minutes, okay? If you know Hawaiian, you can do that. Otherwise, the first principle of Huna says, the world is what you think it is. What this proverb says literally is, all knowledge is not taught in one school. Which means there are many different ways and many different approaches to knowledge, that many different teachers have a different idea about knowledge and about the things that they want to present, because everybody thinks differently about different things. The world is what you think it is, or the world is what this teacher says it is, or the world is what that teacher says it is. And this proverb reminds us that there are all these different points of view. Okay? So same concept here. I'm going to go down the list. I have on another one. This can't show it up very much. This says Hawaiian philosophy, proverbs, and principles. The second principle says there are no limits. And put into one form of Hawaiian, it says Aohe pu'uki e ki'e ke ho'oa'u ia api'i. And what that means is no cliff is so tall that it cannot be climbed. The same concept put into a very graphic image, right, of that, doesn't matter how high the cliff is, it can be climbed. There are no limits. Another one here, this is going to take a little thinking, but we have one that says, energy flows where attention goes. Nice phrasing in English. But one of the Hawaiian ways of saying this is ulu kahoi. Now, one of the things that the Hawaiians loved is wordplay. So sometimes you have to realize that things are being said with wordplay, because what this literally says is the sweet potato vine grows. That's nice. What's that got to do with anything? How can that be a proverb? But you see, it's a play on the word ulu and a play on the word hoi. Because ulu means to grow, but it also means to increase. And it also means to inspire. And the hoi, if you double the word, hoi hoi, one of the meanings of that is interest. So what is growing is interest in the direction of the vine. Okay? So it says also the sweet potato vine is growing, but it also says interest is growing in a particular direction. And that's related to this idea that energy flows where attention goes. We have one which is supposed to be a fairly modern proverb, maybe in the 1700s. But this is wela kahau. And what it really means is strike while the iron is hot. That's what it means. Hau is a Hawaiian word for iron. And in the early days when they were having they had blacksmiths, actually from China. They had blacksmiths from China that visited the Hawaiian Islands in the 1700s, the early part of the 1700s. And so blacksmiths came here to work as things went on, and there was a lot of iron work done. And so the Hawaiians, who were their apprentices at blacksmithing, learned this idea that you have to strike while the iron is hot. And it means, just like what that means in English, do it now. The proverb is, now is the moment of power. Now is the moment to act. The proverb that says, to love is to be happy with, which gives some people some problems because they don't really understand love. This is a Hawaiian point of view of love. It comes from the word aloha. But as a proverb, we have one here that says, he olina leo, ka ke aloha. And the translation is, joy is in the voice of love. Okay? And that carries out that idea that when we're talking about love, we're talking about the happy part of any relationship. We have one that says all power comes from within. That's one of the Huna principles. As a proverb, I like this one, aya no ikamea e meleana. And this means, let the singer select the song. And it carries that whole idea, not just as a singer, but let the person who's doing the thing make the choices, is really what it comes down to. The power comes from within. And finally, the last principle, one that gives most people most problems, effectiveness is the measure of truth. What matters is what works. What this says is, ike ia no ka loea, ike kuaha. And the meaning as a proverb is, an expert is recognized by the altar that he builds. Right? Effectiveness is the measure of truth. So we find these are just a few proverbs that carry those same concepts. And this is just to show these are an intrinsic part of Hawaiian culture. Okay. Now we open it up for...
Surprised that they were speaking this way in front of, I guess, the Congress. But they were talking about a time not too long ago. First of all, they believe that there's still many hidden kahuna on Kauai.
Hmm.
And that the reason one of the main reasons why that is because they're still afraid that there are powers in this modern society that if they were known, that they would be taken care of, hunted down or otherwise. And so it's a very strong fear.
Yes?
to have. It's, if I'm talking in some modern times, how much of that do you feel is a real?
All right.
That's kind of a sensitive question, but
Well-
I noticed there aren't any, that I know of any real, native people here.
That's okay, it wouldn't matter. Because there's so many of them think so differently about everything. Okay?
I understand.
So, but basically, let's go back for a little history. The Hawaiian king, with goading or support from his foster mother, who was also the regent, after the death of Kamehameha, the king declared, all the kapus are lifted. And the meaning of the context in the time was all those rigid behavior patterns no longer had to be followed, and the temples no longer were used, and the